The banana crates arrived before dawn, while the street was still blue with sleep, and the cats were stitching shadows between shuttered shops, and the woman who would not look into mirrors slid out from behind the tarpaulin, tied her scarf tight against the breeze, and set to work with a practiced quiet. She was known as the banana seller, the one with the soft voice and the fast hands, and the habit of turning her face away from the glint of chrome hubcaps and spoonbacks and phone screens. The cart was painted the color of turmeric and patched in places with bottle caps and wire. She laid down old newspapers to soak up the sap, lifted the bunches carefully so she wouldn't bruise them, and checked the ripening with a thumb. She worked as if each banana were a delicate letter from someone far away, something to be handled with respect. The street yawed open as the city woke. Rickshaws coughed, shutters rattled, a tea seller balanced a tower of cups, and a boy, barefoot and bird-boned, came trotting in with a broom almost taller than he was, clearing last night's dust into a hopeful little hill the wind would undo. She paid him in coins and a banana, the way she always did, and he saluted like a soldier and darted off, and the day began properly, step by step, the way days did in that old market near the clock tower, where time had watched 1,000 small lives with gentle patience. Her name on the street was just Ayapa, older sister, because she made everyone feel a little steadier, though no one could say exactly why. She had a way of wrapping a banana in the corner of her dupatta and handing it to a crying child that paused the storm. She had a way of pressing exact change into a hand that felt like a blessing disguised as math. She sold by the bunch, by the half bunch, by the one, peeled one on request for elders whose teeth were more memory than tool. She did not haggle much. She did not need to. The work kept her hands busy, and her mind quieter than it was in rooms with mirrors. When a customer held up a phone to check a message, and the screen flashed her a ghost of herself, she turned aside as if to sneeze, and no one thought much of it because everyone had their ways. When she passed the chrome mudguard of a motorbike that could show you a fisheye slice of the world, she stepped wide, as if that was just respect for the machine. When the tea seller left a spoon too near the edge of his counter, she pushed it back with a fingertip, not looking, as if she were tidying the day. People accepted it the way they accepted that the clock tower missed a chime. Sometimes, it was a quirk, a small thing. But if only they knew, if only they guessed how far the roots of that small thing ran, the story would have stopped the whole market for a breath. Midday heat melted into fruit-sweet air. She stacked her ripest bananas to catch the eyes of those who wanted quick sugar and lined the greener ones on the shady side to wait their turn. She knew the pulse of the day, the office clerk who bought 2 for lunch because he claimed it was healthier than biryani, but carried the biryani anyway. The mother with 3 daughters whose fingers were threaded together like prayer, who always asked for a discount and always got it. The old man with the chessboard who pretended to come for bananas but really came to ask if she had read the latest news about a train accident, about the price of wheat, about the mayor's promises. She listened, gave him the sort of small nod that made him feel heard, and offered him the least spotted fruit, because he liked to admire them before he ate them, as if beauty might peel into sweetness. In the late afternoon, when the light turned honey and shadows stretched like cat's paws, she packed a cloth bag with the days unsold and set a few aside for the children who would gather on the edge of the park. She did this every day with an unobtrusive rhythm that made it seem like a simple kindness, and not what it really was, a careful circuit she had drawn for herself, so she would pass certain corners at times when shop windows were closed, and water troughs went still, and there would be fewer reflective surfaces to ambush her. Water could be a mirror too. She knew that too well. She had learned the lesson once, and the lesson had taken everything and left her this: the precisely measured lines of a day, the ritual of fruit and shade and kindness, a life lived to the side of reflective wells. In another part of the city, years back before the market and the yellow cart, and the name Appa, there had been a house with a balcony where bougainvillea unraveled like a ribbon, and a girl whose name was Zoya, and a mother who loved mirrors a little too much. She owned 3, one framed in carved wood, one rimmed with tiny birds, one the size of a door. She said mirrors told the truth that faces hid, and she would stand Zoya before them and tilt her chin and push back her hair, and speak of poise and carriage, as if she were giving a geometry lesson. Zoya learned early how to keep a smile still enough that it did not tremble, and how to see without seeing herself, how to look at the corner of a reflection, the place where reflection frayed into the real. The house was often full of people because Zoya's father was a man who could fill a room with laughter, or a newspaper with apology, depending on the day. He ran a foundation, and his photograph often found itself printed under words like patron and benefactor, and sometimes under words like controversy, which Zoya didn't understand then, and came to understand too well later. People came to ask favors, and to offer loyalty. They looked at Zoya, the way people look at a bright new coin, and her mother looked at her as if she were a portrait she hadn't finished painting. "You are a promise," her mother would say, "and promise is a mirror. Do not shame the mirror." There was a competition once, not quite a beauty pageant, not quite a scholarship interview, those blurry events cities invent, to make a story out of girls. Zoya's mother insisted she attend. It was held in a hotel ballroom lit, as if it were made of light. There were girls in pastel dresses, and girls in brighter armor, and a panel of judges whose smiles were teeth. Zoya walked a line drawn on the carpet and answered questions about leadership and kindness and ambition, and her mother sat in the audience, with her hands clasped so tight they blanched. The results were announced with ribbons and photographs, and because the ballroom was all mirrors, 1,000 versions of each smile bloomed and dissolved in the shine. Zoya did not win first prize. She won a different thing, a photograph leaked online, a moment when her face was caught in a mirror at a sharp angle, and made to look like she was sneering at another girl. By morning the picture had traveled further than the truth, and came home wearing names that were not hers. Arrogant, proud, cruel. People on screens wrote sentences about her as if she were a character they had invented and could unmake. Her father's foundation was dragged into the comments like a kite into a storm. Her mother shut all the mirrors in the house with bedsheets, and then, as if panicking at the sudden darkness, tore them off again, and shouted that only cowards hid. Zoya stood very still in her room and felt the precise shape of how quickly a life could tilt. Weeks later, the truth scuffed its way back, as truth does, tired and less glamorous than the drama, and the editors moved on to brighter fires. But the family had already cracked. Her father found a new scandal, because sometimes when one door of shame opens, the other doors make a draft and slam, and he made decisions that looked like mercy to him and cowardice to everyone else. Her mother went harder at the mirrors, staying until her eyes filmed with tears. She started talking to her reflection as if it would testify for her in court, and then began talking to Zoya, as if she were the reflection and not the girl. The night the house burned, no one could say exactly what happened. Maybe the vanity lights had been left on under a scarf, maybe a candle tipped, maybe anger itself is combustible when it has nowhere to go. Zoya woke to smoke like a wall. She wrapped her scarf over her mouth, called for her mother, saw the long mirror cracked from its top to its heart, and heard the sound of something falling that wasn't furniture. She found her mother half on the floor, half leaned against the mirror as if she had tried to walk into it. Zoya pulled and shouted and burned her hands and realized with the clear cruelness of crisis that she would not be able to lift her, and the smoke was turning the air to syrup, and the door was a mouth closing. She ran. She ran because the neighbor's child needed to be awakened, because the fire would spread, because she could not stand it 1 second longer, because 1,000 reasons attacked her at once, and all of them were true, and none of them would comfort her later. When the fire brigade came, they found her outside with hose water in her hair, shaking, holding the neighbor's baby like a talisman. The mirror had melted, a silver river on the floor. People said grief would be a mirror if you let it. She decided she would not. After the fire there were official papers to sign and unofficial whispers to endure and photographs to avoid. She cut her hair. She took a train without telling anyone. She kept walking until the city she found didn't know her. She took the money left to her in a trust she could access with a code no one else remembered, and she buried it quietly in work that did not want cameras, night food drives, a women's clinic that needed a bright light and new blood pressure cuffs, school fees paid without receipts and promissory notes kept in the teeth. She did not want to sit behind a desk and see herself reflected in its glossy surface. She wanted a small work with strong roots. She bought a cart. Why bananas? Because bananas are ordinary and marvelous both. Because they are cheap enough for anyone and gentle enough for babies and elders. Because one fruit could be turned into many meals. Because she wanted to handle something that bruised if you were careless as a way to train her hands not to be careless ever again. She learned the market the way you learn a person. She learned who watered down milk and who gave a little extra when no one watched. She learned the path of the sun, where it would throw reflections off a window at 4 in the afternoon like a knife. And she learned to be on a different street at 4. She learned to wrap a small makeup mirror that came free with a crate in newspaper without touching its face, to toss it into the trash with her eyes closed like a prayer. She learned to help without being seen helping. A schoolgirl who seemed always to be running came by one day breathless and handed her a folded paper. "My brother," the note said in a child's hand, "has a cough that doesn't stop. Please, if you know a cheap doctor." She placed 3 bananas and a business card in the girl's hand, a doctor's name who owed her a favor, an appointment time, a phrase to say that would make the front desk understand this bill went a different way than usual. The girl's eyes filled, and she would have fallen to kiss Zoya's hand if Zoya hadn't caught it and said gently that gratitude was heavy and she had a small cart. The girl laughed through tears and ran, and Zoya felt the day balance. In the evening she walked to the park and found a bench that tilted slightly, the way old benches do, and sat with the bag of unsold fruit. Children appeared, magneted by sweetness. She passed out bananas and asked them what their favorite superhero could not do yet, and what they would teach them. She listened seriously and did not correct grammar because she had learned that people grow toward the light of being taken seriously. A boy with eyes like lit coal told her he wanted to be a cricket player, but his father said only rich boys broke bats for fun. And she said quietly that bats were sometimes gifts left in places by people who would never confess to leaving them. A week later a bat appeared carefully leaning against the boy's door, wrapped in brown paper. A girl with a bruise the size of a thumbprint on her wrist said she wanted to cut hair, not be married, and Zoya said that hair was a river everyone carried, and she should learn its currents. And then she spoke to a friend who ran a salon and made room for an apprentice. The banana cart paid for itself and for the bananas and for small things. The trust paid for the bigger secrets, and no one thought to connect the two because it suited the city to believe simple stories. If only they knew, they would have kept her safer or made her life unbearable, and she was not sure which frightened her more. One afternoon, a man with a camera slung across his chest the way a soldier wears a rifle stopped at her cart. He bought a bunch and a half, had her peel one because he liked to take the first bite without thinking about work, and then between chew and swallow, he tilted his lens to the side and caught a blip of her face in the reflection of a metal jug on the tea stall next door. She felt it as a chill, the way some people feel the approach of rain. "Please," she said, "not that way." He was quick enough to be ashamed. He lowered the camera. "I just have eyes that itch," he said, "for light, for angles." She nodded. "I have eyes that itch for quiet," she said, "for corners." He paid, left, came back the next day without the camera, and sat on a crate and told her about the photograph that had made his reputation, a single tear on a politician's face that turned out to be rain. He said he had been paid well for a lie the world wanted. She told him about a mirror that had melted. She did not tell him whose mirror. He had the sense not to ask. Later he would leave a packet of printing paper at a school with her name not on it, and the head mistress would think it was from a donor who liked ink more than applause. There were moments when history reached for her, a hand out of a crowd, a magazine in a barber shop with an old photograph of Zoya's mother at a charity gala, smile like a blade, a man at the corner who sold pirated DVDs calling out an actress's name that had once been mistaken for hers. A news segment replayed on the TV above the tea stall showing the old house, the old balcony, the bougainvillea scorched but stubbornly reblooming. In those moments she would touch the string she wore around her wrist, plain as a shoelace, and breathe as if she were back at the window counting to 10 with smoke climbing the stairs. She did not want to be found. She also did not want to be missing. This is a difficult line to walk. She walked it the way she wheeled her cart down a narrow lane, with attention, with a willingness to stop and tie. If a truck wanted the same space, with the knowledge that someone honking does not make you vanish. On a morning scented with wet dust after a mote of rain had finally broken and made a gift to the banyan roots, a boy she'd never seen before came to her cart holding a small oval wrapped in cloth. He was 10 maybe, elbows like knots in string. He set the oval down as if it were a sleeping bird. "My mother sent this," he said, "to sell." Zoya unwrapped it automatically, and then almost dropped it because it was a mirror, antique, framed in tin punched with flowers. The glass had bubbles in it like trapped breath.
the kind of old flaw that makes a mirror feel like a well. The boy said softly, "She says it is lucky, but I think it is heavy." Zoya covered the mirror again with an even hand. She could feel her pulse in her throat. She looked at the boy and saw damp crescents of worry under his eyes. "You are carrying your house on your back," she said.
"And you are too small for such a thing."
He nodded, mute. She asked about his mother and he told her the cough that did not stop, the landlord who was patient and then was not, the uncle who said he would help, and then said he would help later. She knew the later that meant. She set the wrapped mirror inside the cart as if it required
Nest, then handed the boy 2 bunches of bananas, and a slip of paper with an address and a time and a name, and then she handed him money that looked like it came from the day's sales, and did not. He stared. "You said you were selling," she reminded him, "and I am buying." He swallowed hard. For a moment in the shine of his eyes, she saw the mirror she had not looked into in years. She kept her gaze steady. "Do you know what to do with a banana leaf?" she asked, and he laughed as if she had told a joke, because of course he did, and the day lightened by a fraction. When he left, she took the wrapped mirror to the back of the cart and set it gently on a crate. The day tugged at her apron strings as days do, wanting her to keep up. She sold to the clerk and the mother, and the old man with the chessboard and the tea seller shouted that the brinjal man had won a small lottery, and the brinjal man pretended to be modest, and then bought tea for everyone. The mirror waited, its quiet an invitation, its wait a dare. She knew there are moments when you either keep walking the old circle, faithfully, obedient to your fear, or you step off it onto the dirt and find out if your feet can make a new path. The wrapped shape seemed to hum under its cloth. She was 40 now. The fire had been 15 years ago. In that time, children had become tall. A banana cart had turned into a map of kindness. Perhaps mirrors could be many things. Perhaps the story she hated was not the last story she would get. She took her lunch break early. When the lane thinned, she moved to the alley behind the tea stall, where the wall was mottled with old movie posters fading to ghosts. She sat on a plastic stool, unwrapped the mirror, and set it up against a box. She positioned herself so the light would not be cruel. Her hands trembled and then stilled. She thought of her mother saying, "Promise is a mirror," and she thought, "I will promise something else then. I will promise to look not for flaw, or for blame, or for the world's unkind stories, but for the ordinary fact of my face." This decision was a small hinge. The whole door could turn on. She leaned toward the glass. At first she saw only the alley's pale sky, and a gull that had made a mistake and flown too far inland. Then slowly she saw a woman's face resolve. The line between brow and hair, the scar near the temple that she had only ever touched, the mouth she had learned to keep from trembling, the eyes that had carried a house through a fire and a secret through a market, and still had room to be gentle. She looked for the girl she had been, and did not find her. She looked for the woman the city had named, and did not find her either. She found herself, unspectacular and undeniable. Tears came, but they were not a wave, not a storm. They were a rain that washed a thing, then ended. She leaned closer and said aloud, to her own face, the word she had never said in a mirror, "I forgive you." The alley felt larger for a moment, as if a wall had moved back. She exhaled. She wrapped the mirror again with a care that felt different now, not avoidance but respect, and she made up her mind to return it to the boy's mother with a note that said this was not a lucky object or an unlucky one. It was simply a way to practice honesty, and some days that practice was easier to do with fruit, with hands, with money, with help, than with glass. Word travels strangely. That evening, the boy's mother came herself, thin as a rumor, with a cough that she caught and held in her chest so it would not escape and embarrass her. Zoya handed her the money again, this time in an envelope, and the appointment card, and a tiny bottle of clove syrup, the tea seller's wife swore by. The woman began to cry, and Zoya guided her to the bench and sat with her until the tears ebbed. A man approached, older, with a limp. He watched the scene with a curious smile, and then, when the woman left, he said to Zoya,
in a low voice that he had known someone once who had the same way of tilting her head when she listened. Someone from the other side of the city, someone whose photograph had been in the papers a long time ago, Zoya said. Many faces tilt, and he said, I suppose so, and bought 2 bananas, and left. She understood then that the safety she had wrapped around herself like a shawl was real but also threadbare in places. She could mend it, or she could decide she did not need it quite so heavy anymore. A week later, a small news item appeared about a clinic's generosity, about anonymous donors making a run of night appointments free for families who could not come during the day because they worked. A photograph at the bottom showed a tray of bananas on the clinic counter with a handwritten sign, 1 per patient, courtesy of a friend. The tea seller held up the paper and shouted that generosity had taste at last. The old man with the chessboard harumphed that it was probably a publicity stunt. Zoya smiled without showing her teeth, and arranged her fruit into a heart near the price board, and the joke made the day warm. Children traced the heart with their fingers and rearranged it, and she let them because geometry in the hands of children becomes kindness. In time, the city decided the banana seller was a small myth it liked. There were rumors that she could read a person's needs in the way they picked up a fruit and set it down, that the bananas from her cart kept the nightmares away, that she had once slapped a policeman with a ripe one for shaking a beggar, and he had laughed with pulp on his cheek and apologized, that she wrote letters for the old, and read letters for the young, and tied them with string, that she had a scar under her scarf from something she had survived. All of these were true in their way, and none of them were the whole. If only they knew who she really was, they would have made a bigger myth, and the bigger myth might have knocked over the cart. She preferred the small one. It held. Years passed the way markets do, in units of mango season, and monsoon and budget day, and the occasional blackout that sent everyone into the street to whisper under a sky overwhelmed with stars. Zoya aged into a dapa without resenting it. The mirror in the tin frame hung wrapped on a nail in the back of her 1-room apartment, a friendly silence against the wall. Sometimes she took it down and looked for 5 breaths. Sometimes she didn't. She stopped avoiding puddles. She caught her reflection by accident in the side of a tea kettle, and did not flinch. She taught herself to take a photograph with a child in the park when mothers asked, by aiming the camera slightly off, and letting chance do the rest. She wrote her mother a letter she would never send, and then she burned it carefully in a dish, and told the smoke she was not ashes, and the smoke, being smoke, said nothing, and disappeared. One evening, very late, with the market asleep, except for dogs and secrets, a man leaned on her cart, and called her by her old name, perfectly, like a bell ringing true. She froze, the way animals freeze when the forest goes sudden quiet. He lifted both his open hands to show he carried nothing but memory. He was older, heavier at the edges, the camera strap across his chest like an old habit, and he said, Zoya, I owe you a photograph. She looked at the puddle at his feet, and saw a bad version of the moon, and then she met his eyes and nodded. He took nothing out of his bag. He said, I missed the story for years because I was looking for surface. I am here to say, someone told me your mother loved mirrors like a country loves flags, and someone told me you love people like a mirror loves light. Oh, and I think the second story is the true one. She said, it is late, and I sell bananas. He smiled, then sell me one. And he paid, and she peeled it for him, and he ate it with the reverence of a sacrament, and he left. Later, her card appeared in a photograph in a gallery show titled Faces Without Faces, a series of empty rooms and objects that somehow carried their owners like a scent, and a yellow rectangle under a street lamp that warmed the whole wall. No one said her name, which was exactly right. In the end, nothing spectacular revealed her. She let a little truth leak out slowly the way sap beads on a cut stem. On a day heavy with heat, she walked into the clinic waiting room, carrying a crate. She placed it on the floor, and began to stack bananas on the counter with a sign that said, Take one. A girl in a school uniform looked up and said, Ipa, my aunt says you are an angel, but I think you are a person. Zoya laughed, and the laugh had the sound of a door opening, and letting a better breeze into a room where people had been waiting too long. Yes, she said, exactly, and the clinic staff looked at one another, as if they had all heard a small code being entered correctly. In the market that afternoon, the old man with the chessboard told the tea seller that the banana seller had a look of someone who had met herself and liked what she found. The tea seller said, "I hope one day to meet myself and not run," and they both laughed without cruelty. The clock tower chimed the right hour at the right time, just once, as if to verify something. If you stand now at the corner where the market spills into the park, and you watch the yellow cart under the shadow of the banyan, and you see the woman who will never again avoid a mirror, but will always prefer faces to reflections, you will notice that she has the air of someone who is finished with running, and not yet tired of walking. Children will come. Men with after-work hunger will come. Mothers with lists will come. She will weigh and count, and bless and joke. She will tuck small notes into hands that need them. She will refuse to be the story, and be the story anyway, because that is how stories work. They climb the scaffolding of ordinary kindness, and wave like flags from the top. If only they knew who the banana seller was, they would use bigger words, ones that make people feel distant from the subject. Better they know what she does, because that is the mirror she chose. She makes a lane softer by passing through it. She makes the idea of help less frightening, by making it look like fruit. She looks at herself when she needs to, and the mirror, which is no longer a door to grief, but a window to a room she is repainting, reflects nothing more, and nothing less than what stands before it. The woman with a scar, and a smile, a history, and a present, a cart, and two strong hands, a life that belongs to her. Thank you for reading this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and comment.